Hello and welcome to Focus on Fantasy Romance, episode number 25, a podcast where we discuss the books, genre, industry, and our geeky lives. I'm your host, Elle Klaus. I am joined today by A.R. de Klerk.
Hello.
Ishabelle Torrey, who's waving, and Paulina Woods.
Hello!
Since this is the first Friday of the month, we're going to start with author news, and then we have a mixer topic. So if no one objects, I will go first. I don't have a lot of news. Our anthology, the Reflections of Love anthology, came down, so we got the rights back to our individual short stories, so I published that. Starcrossed is available on all platforms, but if you go to my website, ellklaus.com, you can sign up for a newsletter and get that for free. This might be a repeat, but my book 2 is in beta. Book 2 of my Wilderland Chronicles, the Deceiving the Bandit Lord, is in beta reads. And I won the basketball bracket thingy at my day job and won a $10 gift card. I had no idea what I was doing. Go sports team, but I won money. Hey, go me. That's all my news. What do you got, AR?
News. Let's see. I released 2 books in March, at the end of March. So those are out. That's An Enduring Sun, which is my first cyborg novel for Takamo Universe. That's available on all platforms. And Redshift, which is what I call future punk. And that's also available on all platforms and still 99 cents for a limited time if you guys want to pick that up. The anthology came down, so like Elle, I went ahead and republished my short story separately. It's available on all platforms, and it's currently free. You can grab it anywhere, anytime, any place. Reviews are appreciated. Thank you very much. And it is male romance. I'm just going to stick that out there for anybody who knows me. It's the first one that I've ever done, but it's extremely important for the characters. So I think that's all. I'm currently working on Dark Star, which is book 2 in my Cyborg series, and just hit the 40,000 word mark. So my goal is to finish that by the end of the month. Paulina or Ish, which one is next?
I think it's me because Ish is doing that face like, not me. I still haven't found a cover for my anthology one, so it's still not up yet. So I'm still struggling with what I'm gonna do. I haven't published anything. I've had not writer's block, I've had writer's lazy. So I haven't really written anything, but I'm hoping to have my science fiction go to editors on the end of next month, which is May, the end of May. I'm also signed up to do a book signing in Ontario, California, and that's going to be in August 5th. Yeah, that's all for that one. I did get a bartending position at my job. Well, okay, so I got a bartending training position at my job, which is cool. So, which means that when one opens, I'll be able to take bartending. So that means more money for me, more money to edit. Maybe I can push out more books. And yeah, that's all my news. Ish, your turn.
Let's see. Well, today was poopy. I'll just start off with that because, it's bad news, but it's still news. I lost an entire manuscript. It's lost somewhere out there in space and just makes me cry. I actually cried for hours today. Depressed. I broke my diet. Ate chocolate cake. It was okay because I've lost 3 pounds, so, kind of earned it. But in the good news, Maiden of Fire, which is book 1, is on pre-order right now. It releases the 18th, and I'm beyond excited. If anybody who's been following me knows, I wrote that book for my sister, who lost her baby when he was 14 days old. There is so much of my sister in my heroine. It's just kind of scary, actually. let's see. I figured out how to create Amazon ads, so that's good news. I seem to be getting some good conversion rates. So I can share those tips later. I mean, it's going nice. Other than that, that's really all I have. Maybe next week I can tell you guys I managed to find main light out there somewhere.
Well, hopefully you can share some good news, because yeah, that was 48,000 worth of words that you lost. Ugh, no one.
Yep, upward of 48,000.
Yeah, no one wants that. Yeah. So today's a mixer. The topic is bestiality and where the line is in romance. Because when you get into paranormal, urban fantasy, you get some, or sci-fi, you get some non-human characters. I remember when I was shopping my first book around for a publisher, they specifically said, no bestiality, which I agree with. But they made exceptions for shifters, werewolves and bear shifters, and so we're going to kind of talk about that. And I do know that Amy had an issue with one of the books we reviewed, Lisa Blackwood's, now I can't remember the name of it, but the character, the male main character, was not human. He was a type of bird race with human features. And I think Amy had some pretty strong opinions about that. I honestly, when I was reading it, because he looks mostly human, I didn't even think about it. I'm like, oh yeah, you're right. He's not human. He's a person, but he's not human. So yeah, we have a lot of characters in these stories that we don't even think about. Wait, that's not a man in the traditional sense. So I thought it'd be fun to kind of talk about that. And Amy made some kind of ominous statement about taking notes. Did you? What did you think about Lisa Blackwood's story? You said that you didn't like the bird parts. Unmute yourself.
Trying. Okay, so it's not that I didn't like the story. I overall was not unhappy with the story. What bugs me about stories like that is the idea of a person who is described as very obviously human, as her main female character was, who doesn't bat an eyelash at the fact that this other character is very obviously described as not human. And whether or not I agree or disagree with the romance part of it, the physical part of it gets to be a little bit unbelievable, because in the story, she never once had this moment where she said, he's not like me. And as readers, you know, when you read a character, you turn that character into someone who's like you in your head. And the same thing goes for when you are first meeting or talking to or experiencing another group of people or a race of people or species of people in this case. The thought is inevitably going to cross your mind that the first thing you're going to notice are the differences between yourself and this other person. I thought the author did really good at describing the bird race and the ways that you know, they were different, and the fact that they had all this plumage and they had these claws in the bottom and everything, you know, on their bottom feet and everything. He did have a human-like face, which I think would make it a lot more easy to relate to him. But I just felt like the fact that the female character never once considered, you know, hey, what's under those pants, and is that gonna fit? You know, is there a tab B for slot A type situation? You know what I mean? Because obviously, dude's a bird. Who knows what else is, you know? And the one thing, and we'll come back to this later, one thing that bugs me, I will not even read it, is centaur, satyr. I don't care what the top half looks like. I'm telling you, the bottom half is animal. It's bestiality. That crosses the line for me. That's no. If you don't, you know, and if it's two centaurs, go at it. But if it's a human and a centaur, or a human and a satyr, I start having queasy feelings in my stomach, because that's too far down the line. And let me tell you, I did do a little research on this subject, and I don't put the word bestiality into Google. Okay, because I Googled bestiality and book covers. Okay, obviously that was a little too broad, because I got some things that were even blurred out on Google. And it was like bestiality throughout the century. And I'm like scrolling, and I'm like, oh my God, like every type of animal you can imagine in any type of position you can imagine. It was like the Kama Sutra of cats and dogs. I'm just like, I don't need to see this. I kept hitting escape, and it wouldn't go away. So I think that, you know, the idea has been there throughout centuries, and all different kinds of texts and manuscripts and books. And there's sculptures and art and everything, but it crosses the line for me. And P's laughing, so she must have something to say too.
Sorry, this is side chat. I'm being a butthead, but I was leaning over as you were talking, trying to look for the book, only because I wanted to read some of it.
We're gonna clean the garage out.
Amy, you're not muted.
Huh? I heard something else. That's why I quit talking. I was like, "Oh, you forgot to mute." So I was looking for a book. It's by Mary J. Lau, and she wrote it's called Dark Dreamers. It was in two other books, Dark Dreamers, and she wrote about gargoyle brothers, and she didn't change them. So like when you were talking about just kind of, you know, the difference and like wondering, I can see that, because when she finally did see him, she was like, oh God, what, you know, like she started wondering, because he was inhuman in feature, but still humanoid. But she still had that kind of hesitant, wait, hold on. And I think that's kind of what authors forget when they write stories where the people aren't human. They forget that, I'm sorry, if I fell in love with a guy and he was a Birdman, okay, I wouldn't. I'm sorry, feathers, I wouldn't. But if I did, I would still sit there and wonder, like, what is he carrying? What is, you know, it's because birds really don't have penises. So I mean, they do, but they're, you know what I mean? The bird penises. So you still wonder if the guy, that's what he has. And I wouldn't fall in love with him. But it's just like the Frankenstein. Yeah. Sorry, there's a chat on the side that we can read, and I kind of looked over on accident. But I think if you do it right, it's not bestiality, I guess you can say, because while I was reading the book, I love the character. Literally, I cannot. The funny thing is that right now I have like 4 names in my head, and I don't know which one was right, so I don't want to say it. But you fall in love with him and with his brother, but they are full on raised in the Dark Ages gargoyles, and you know they're big, they're clunky, but they're gentle. They were born to be guardians and to protect mankind, and they fall in love, and the women who fall in love with them they fall in love with that protective part of them, and what comes with that is, of course, intimacy, and they fell in love with who they were, I guess you can say. And to me, I love them more than I liked half the human characters in half the books I read. Like I go back to those books just because I'm like, oh my God, I want to read this book. And they're monsters. They have the heavy brows, they have the ears, they have the protruding, and they're not human. So I think if you do it right, it's not bestiality. Now, if you're doing a dog and the dog hasn't shifted and the dog is mounting a woman, that's nasty. So that's another thing is I did read a book where the shifter guy had to be in shifted form to mate with the female, but the female was human. And I was like, no, that's gross. And so I think at that point, if that's the way your shifters have to mate, I think that both parties should be shifters. Because any other way you put that is going to come out bestiality or weird. I mean, they can't fall in love with a parrot or with, you know, something else. Because if you have to be into your shifted form in order to mate, yeah. Ugh, that was a horrible book. I put it down. I can't remember the name. I wish I could. Just because I want to put it out there, but I cannot remember the name of that book. It was like a few years ago. Ish, you have anything to say?
I can't say I've ever read a book where the shifter was shifted during sex. Every book I've ever read, including books with satyrs, they do have the ability to shift into human to be compatible with their human mate. And I read a lot of shifter. I edit a lot of shifter romance, actually. And I've never come across that. I don't know how I would react. I think I would probably be a little curious, probably grossed out, but I've never come across it. They always save their shifting for it makes a great fight scene. You know, his clothes ripped off of him, and you know, he shifted into his bear and whooped the bad guy's ass. That's always great. So I really don't have any experience with it, but I'm along the lines with Paulina. I really don't want to have parrot sex in my head. So it's either we're both shifters, or if we're not both shifters, then you somehow are human while we're doing it, at least, you know. I don't, that's gross. So that's really all I have to say on that specific topic.
I think I've read a lot more sci-fi where the male is not human. I think the one shifter was a Cressley Cole, and it was, I think, a vampire and a shifter, and he didn't, like the final scene where they actually consummated their relationship, he wasn't shifted, he was kind of feral, but he was still a man. So I'd never had a problem with that. But like I said, I've read a lot of sci-fi romance where the guy is an alien, and they never address his sex organs. Like, there's this comic I see floating around every once in a while, and it's Superman and Lois Lane, and they're getting jiggy with it, and he takes off his pants, and she freaks out, and she's like, "Are those claws?" And he's like, "Yeah, it's so that we stay joined until you're impregnated." And she like freaks out. I'm like, okay, that is funny, but kind of realistic. I'm like, if you're gonna get jiggy with an alien who didn't, you know, evolve on Earth, so like a lot of the mammals evolved on Earth, they're kind of similar in structure, essentially. I mean, they kind of are. So if you've got an alien race that, although bipedal, evolved on a different planet, their sex organs are going to be different. And I've never even, one time I read a book where the author addressed the different makings, and it was, I want to say C.E. Kilgore. Do you know who I'm talking about? AR, she's in the sci-fi romance brigade, and she addressed it, and it was kind of weird for me. Like, I'm like, I understood why she was talking about what was in his pants, but I'm like, this is just kind of, I don't know. Like, it worked, but it was like bizarre. So maybe that's why they don't talk about it. But yeah, you've got all these women being abducted by aliens and having sex with aliens, and no one talks about their bits. Like, I assume they're compatible because they're getting orgasms, but I don't really know. Don't really know. I thought I saw in the chat.
Yeah, I had two points that actually came up while we were talking. The first one was I read a book I don't remember who the author was or even what the name of the book was, but it was part of a series about shifters that I was reading. And I think she was some kind of government agent who was watching these shifters, and they're cat shifters. And so in explaining about how their anatomy was similar to a cat, she talked about how the male had these parts that come out and actually hook into the female's uterus for that specific, it's like a barb that won't let go because it keeps them joined together, because sometimes the female is unwilling, I guess, in the wild. And she actually explained that in the book, like the man still had this going on in his human form because he was a cat shifter. And so she was like watching him sun himself on a rock, you know, like cats like to do in the sun, and he was naked. And the scientist guy who was with her observing these, you know, cat people or whatever, was explaining to her like, there's not very many females left, and you know, and then he got wind of her, and you know, he smelled her pheromones, and she was his mate, and blah blah blah. The book rolled on from there. But they actually spent like a paragraph or two talking about anatomy and how that worked, you know, so that later on when the getting jiggy occurred, that part wasn't like out of left field, because you already heard about it like at the sort of at the beginning, so you kind of knew what was going on. But and she kind of knew like what to expect, and it wasn't that they were incompatible, it was just that this happened because of his cat like anatomy. So I was like, oh, okay, so that's one time. And it didn't disgust me. I thought that was weird, but it didn't disgust me because he was human, you know, humanoid. The second thing I was going to talk about was interspecies relationships. And there's actually a show on TV that that addressed interspecies relationships pretty good. And it was on Grimm, if anybody has ever watched Grimm. The Fuchsbau and the werewolf, and I can't think of what their names are. Anyway, they fall in love, and she's basically a fox shifter, and he's basically a wolf shifter, and they're not supposed to get it on. But they actually address like, can they have babies, because you know they're still the Canis genus, but they're not the same species, or they're species and not the genus. I don't remember how that goes because science was a long time ago. But anyway, they actually addressed that in the show, and they ended up having, spoiler alert, cubs, puppies, whatever you want to call them, later on down the road. But they actually addressed like interspecies, and that's the first show I'd ever seen with like shifters on it, where they address like interspecies relationships and like that. And then Ish mentioned Star Trek likes interspecies romance, and they do, but you'll notice like they never discuss the dangling bits either. Like they're all just humanoid, and it's expected to fit, you know. So I don't know, but and then Paulina mentioned dog shifter, and when I was doing my research for this podcast, I came across one that was called, appropriately enough, the title of the book was called Doggy Style. And it was a picture of a lady lying in bed with her dog, and I'm like, yo, nope, not going any farther. Done. And I closed it, and I closed the window, and I moved on. But I mean, it's out there, and it's marketed as romance. But to me, I'm just not sure if the compatibility isn't addressed, if it's gonna make me feel icky.
I'm kind of with you as far as the like a centaur bits and satyrs. I'm kind of with you. Like if the I don't know, the part that's doing the action is animally, like we have like a, I don't know, like a dog on Earth, but like these made up creatures that don't have an actual animal parallel on Earth, it's much easier to suspend belief there. Like gargoyles, I can understand, don't really have too much of a mental hitch, or somebody's like tap dancing somewhere over there at your house, maybe. I lost my train of thought. Like, it's easier to suspend belief or disbelief, or whatever the phrase is, with creatures that aren't actually real, versus creatures that are half actual animals. So like satyrs are half, what is it, goat? Centaurs are half horse. I don't even know how mermaids would procreate because they've got the bottom half of a fish. But stop with the chat. But yeah, I think that's kind of like where my mental line is, that like if it's not a real creature but it's humanoid, I can live with it. If it's half of a real creature, even if most of it is humanoid, that's kind of creepy. What has too many legs, Paulina?
Octopus. She's like, octopus bestiality. And I was like, that's just too many legs. It's like a spider, motherfucker. That's gross.
Okay, tentacle porn is a thing, and we don't need to talk about it.
Okay, can I talk about something else?
Yes.
Okay. So, okay, this isn't a cry for read my book, okay? I'm just letting you know. But I did, my main characters in my first series are gargoyles. And one of the things that I think that I had to deal with was I had to come to terms with the fact that these females, even though, you know, they do fall in love with these monsters. They are monsters. They look like monsters. I mean, literally, I described the first one as a monster. Gerard's, he's, you know, if he walked down the street right now, people would scream. He's like 7 feet tall and like big wings and, you know. But one of the things I did have to address was the fact, and I did more internal than external thought on this one, was the fact that he's 7 feet tall. What's going to be hanging down there? You know, it's not going to be little. And if it is, he needs to go see a doctor. So I did have to address that a little bit. And one way I kind of, I guess, made it work was the fact that I made them where they weren't to the point where they were so, like, I'm sorry. I've read books where when they shift, like shifters, I understand they're not going to be small. Even though most women like average and not, you know, you bring a 12-inch at me, I'm going to chop off half of it and be like, all right, we're good. But I wanted to still keep it where it was realistic and where a girl can realistically take it. Because even though half the girls will talk big and be like, yeah, I want to, you can't, what are you going to do with that? What are you going to do? I mean, is it going to come out your mouth? So that's one of the things that I think a lot of us didn't realize that we have to work on. So yes, he's 7 foot tall, but he's also proportionate to where it fits and it doesn't hurt her. Is that a shirtless guy?
Yes, this is the part of the episode where my husband walks through. This is normal.
But usually he pulls up his shirt. He had no shirt on. Just saying.
Oh yeah, he got sunburned because he went tanning and they changed the bulbs and they
Gotcha.
didn't tell him.
I'm just kidding. That's not nice. But that's one of the things that I think that I had to work on. At one of my best friends, she kind of worked with me on it too, is the fact that I have to make it realistic, and I have to still make it where people see past the monster that they are, because they have claw feet, they have claw hands, they don't shift to human. So it's not like their hands become like ours, or they all of a sudden they can wear shoes. They don't wear shoes. Why should they? You know what I mean? Because they're not human. But I think I'm pretty sure that I did a good job. I mean, I had people fall in love with my characters. And I even asked them, I asked before, I was like, well, do you think it's a little bit taboo? And like they're like, no, it's, you know, it stays away from that. But I think sometimes I'm walking the fine line of what could be. But I follow the authors I like. Like I said, I idolize Marie J. Lou, blah. And so I think I idolize her characters because none of her characters are human except for the human witches, I think. Everybody else is shifters or other things. And it's a very, like we said, it's a very, very, very fine line that you're walking. Because if they don't shift to human, you have to be very careful of what they look like. And that's something like, let me see, who else does a fine job? Lori, wait. Freak. This woman, Shelley Lawrenston. She does a fine job because even though they're human, like the male lions have a mane. and they roar. I'm like, seriously, they carry more of their animalistic tendencies in their human form. So I think she actually balances very well the fact that her characters, whether it be female or male, are very. Okay, hold on. I'm sorry. I'll be done. Okay. She does a very good thing of balancing the fact that they are human. They're animal in human form, not human in animal form. Wait. Yeah. So they are animals, but they have their human form. So they're still animalistic in a human. Oh my God. I mean, they roar, they lick, they still act animals. Not okay. They don't go running around licking people. That'd be weird. But it's a good series to read. I swear to God, you'll fall in love with every single one of the characters because of the fact that, yes, you can actually see the male lion as he's human. He shakes out his mane. They get in each other's faces, and you're like, okay, but you're still human, so we can still have sex with you. Good job. Did anyone else?
Sounds like.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, it just sounds like world building helps a lot with allowing the reader to not question things too much. Like Amy said with the cat shifter romance, that it was foreshadowed and it made sense. A lot of at least with the sci-fi that I've read, the world building as far as interperson relations and traditions and whatnot, it's just kind of glossed over. There's not a lot of explanation as to why characters might do something or act differently. So I think if you find a romance where the character is either not human or can shift into an animal form, the world building is super, super important to make sure that everything goes well together. And I know Amy had a final thought.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, kind of along the lines of the things that Paulina has said, some of my favorite stories ever are shifter romances. I enjoy them. A lot of people enjoy them. I love paranormal romance. I was just thinking about, you mentioned Cressley Cole and I think she's fabulous, and Immortals After Dark makes me laugh so hard. And I don't think you have to be as careful when you're talking about paranormal characters like demons or things like that, because they are fantastical and they don't exist, quote unquote, in the real world. So we have no expectation of what this thing being looks like or how it appears. So in our head as readers, they appear humanoid on two legs, a head and arms and stuff. But when you're talking about animals, then it is a fine line, because we already know what a lion looks like. We know what a dog looks like. We know what a cat looks like, a horse. We already know what those things are. A snake, snake shifters, dragon shifters, all these things. We kind of have an idea of what they look like. And so, we're predisposed to saying sex with something that looks like that will not work if you're a human, or should not work. So I think that's where the author has. But some of my favorite authors who do shifter romance, they do what Paulina was saying. They show you the animal or the animalistic nature that exists inside like the human form. So you get all of the fun of a bear or a lion or, a horse or a dog or whatever a unicorn, but not when it comes down to the sex part. So I think that's kind of where I draw the line. You can be a unicorn, you can be a snake, you can be a parrot if you want to, but I think everybody all here, I think we all agreed, either both people have to be shifters and they need to be shifted when they get it on, or they both need to have a human form in order to have sex. You can't do one and the other.
Sorry, I have one more little thing to say. It's about her too. But she also writes under a different name, and she writes dragons. And I swear to God, if you read that one, you'll laugh, because these dragons, it is said that they're born dragon and was given the ability to become human. So before the humans started mating with her sons, the queen ate humans for snack. And so when she now has a human daughter-in-law, she was like, fine, I won't eat humans anymore. And so that's another interesting aspect of the fact of taking animals and making them human and then making humans fall in love with them, because they're not human. They are animals who was given the ability to become human. So their first thoughts, their first everything is animalistic, is dragon. She's an amazing author. I love her work because of that, because you're just like, oh my God, it's a dragon. Oh man, they gotta be human. Why? You know, so that, instead of wondering why they're animals, you wonder why they have to be human again. So, I mean, I think that if people really want to read a book where it's so well balanced you can't really tell, she's an amazing author to read.
Was that Shelley
And I'm done.
Lawrenson?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so I'll try to get all the links for all the authors and books that we've mentioned during the podcast into the comment or into the show notes. My husband's threatening to turn on Sharknado 3, so I need to leave because I am not watching that movie.
I don't blame you.
Yeah. So thank you for joining us. If you like the podcast, please like, comment, and share. This has been episode 25. Good night.
Good night.